Good morning, friends. Welcome to Sutta Study with Bhante Suddhaso. Today we will be studying the second part of the Mahākoṭṭhita Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 43, and you can find the link of the sutta in the live chat. And welcome to a lot of friends. Hello, Elaine, Gabriella, Gita, James, Elam, Michael, Jens, Edward, Yenny, and Melinda. Good to see you all, friends. And of course, welcome to Bhante Suddhaso. Thank you for sharing the Dhamma once again. So I'll pass it on to Bhante now.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Good morning, friends. So today we will go through the rest of the Mahākoṭṭhita Sutta, so Majjhima Nikaya number 43. So we had just left off with the section on existence, and now we're starting the section on the first jhana. So Venerable Mahākoṭṭhita asks Sāriputta, he says, Venerable, what is the first jhana? So for those who don't know, jhana is states of very strong samadhi. So when the mind is very unified, stable, steady, and alert. So he says, what is the first jhana? So what's the first stage of jhana, the first stage of a very strong samadhi? And Sāriputta answers, Here, Venerable, a monk who is separated from sensuality and separated from unwholesome phenomena attains and remains in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thought and investigation and has rapture and happiness produced by seclusion. So this is the standard definition of first jhana. And Mahākoṭṭhita asks, how many factors does the first jhana have? And Sāriputta replies, the first jhana has 5 factors. Here, Venerable, a monk who has attained the first jhana engages in thought, investigation, rapture, happiness, and mental one-pointedness. Venerable, in this way, the first jhana has 5 factors. So once again, this is the standard description of the 5 factors of first jhana. There's a more detailed list given in the Anupada Sutta, which I spoke about a few weeks ago. So if you're interested in learning more about jhana, that's a great sutta to take a closer look at. Here the standard list, so thought and investigation, the first 2 are vitakka and vichara, which, as I understand it, refers to, in the context of jhana, it refers to the involuntary thoughts which drift through the mind, but which do not distract us from the meditation object. So in first jhana, there can still be a certain amount of background noise in the mind, which is vitakka and vichara, which these days I'm translating that as verbal thought and non-verbal thought, vitakka and vichara. But the important thing here is that, once again, it is involuntary. So it's echoes of past mental activity which appear involuntarily in the mind. And it does not distract us from our meditation object. The next characteristic is translated here as rapture. The Pali word is piti, which these days I usually translate as euphoria. Sometimes it's translated ecstasy, which also I think is a good translation. So piti refers to this very intense, pleasurable feeling all through the body. The next quality is happiness, which is sukha. So sukha is just a general word for happiness or pleasure. In this case, it refers to a more subtle sense of serene bliss. So not as electric and exciting as euphoria, but more of a subtle, serene bliss in the mind. And finally, mental one-pointedness is a translation of the Pali term chit ekagata, which these days I would probably translate as mental unification. So ekaggata means unified, come together into one, come to oneness. So unification, I think, is a much better translation than one-pointedness. So he says, Venerable, in this way, the first jhana has 5 factors. So that's the basic 5 characteristics of first jhana. And Mahākoṭṭhita asks, Venerable, in the first jhana, what factors have been abandoned and what factors are present? And Sāriputta replies, in the first jhana, 5 factors have been abandoned and 5 factors are present. Here, Venerable, a monk who has attained the first jhana has abandoned interest in sensuality. He has abandoned aversion. He has abandoned sloth and torpor. He has abandoned restlessness and remorse. And he has abandoned doubt. That's the 5 hindrances. So this is one of the more accessible definitions of jhana, which also gives us some sense as to what needs to be done in order to approach jhana. One of the more accessible definitions of jhana, and this is a definition my preceptor would use from time to time, is that jhana is when the mind is free of the 5 hindrances and does not stray from its object. So a very simple definition of jhana. Free of the 5 hindrances, does not stray from its object. Very simple definition. And Sāriputta continues, he engages in thought, investigation, rapture, happiness, and mental one-pointedness. It is in this way that in the first jhana, 5 factors have been abandoned and 5 factors are present. So again, reiterating the 5 factors of first jhana. Then Venerable Mahākoṭṭhita asks a different question. He says, Venerable, these 5 faculties have different territories and different domains, and they do not experience each other's territories and domains, namely the eye faculty, the ear faculty, the nose faculty, the tongue faculty, and the body faculty. Venerable, as regards these 5 faculties that have different territories and different domains, and that do not experience each other's territories and domains, what is their resort? And what experiences their territories and domains? So here he's asking about the 5 physical senses. So Sāriputta repeats, these 5 faculties have different territories and different domains, and they do not experience each other's territories and domains, namely the eye faculty, the ear faculty, the nose faculty, the tongue faculty, and the body faculty. So in other words, the eye cannot hear sounds, the ear cannot smell odors, the nose cannot taste things, and the body cannot see things, for example. So each sense faculty only operates within its own domain. And so Sāriputta says, as regards these 5 faculties that have different territories and different domains and that do not experience each other's territories and domains, the mind is their resort, and the mind experiences their territories and domains. So the word being translated here as resort in Pali is patisarana. So resort, I don't particularly like as a translation. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that. So patisarana literally means running back to, or going back to, or returning. Returning would actually be a very literal definition of patisarana. So what is it that one returns to? What is it that one goes back to? What are the 5 physical senses based on? They're based on the mind. And they're all experienced through the mind. They're all within the domain of the mind. So as I've mentioned a number of times in the past, from the Buddhist perspective, everything we experience is in our mind. So all the 5 physical senses are perceived through the mind, experienced in the mind. They're all experienced as mind objects. Whether or not there's a physical correlate, some physical thing that relates to what we think we're perceiving is actually impossible for us to know, because we only ever experience the mind and the mental domain. So then Mahākoṭṭhita asks, these are the 5 faculties: the eye faculty, ear faculty, nose faculty, tongue faculty, and body faculty. Venerable, what is it that the existence of the 5 faculties depends on? In other words, what is necessary in order for one to experience physical sensations? And Sāriputta answers, these are the 5 faculties: eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. Venerable, the existence of the 5 faculties depends on vitality. So vitality is life force. It depends on being alive. And Mahākoṭṭhita asks, what is it that the existence of vitality depends on? Sāriputta answers, the existence of vitality depends on warmth. So an interesting answer here. So he's pointing to the fact that the body has to be warm in order to be alive. If the body is not warm, then it dies. And Mahākoṭṭhita asks, Venerable, what is it that the existence of warmth depends on? And Sāriputta answers, the existence of warmth depends on vitality. In other words, you have to be alive. The body has to be alive in order for it to be warm. So it's these 2 things depend upon each other. So then Mahākoṭṭhita asks, Venerable, we understand the Venerable Sāriputta's statement just now as the existence of vitality depends on warmth. We also understand the Venerable Sāriputta's statement just now as the existence of warmth depends on vitality. Venerable, how is the meaning of the speech to be seen? By the way, I should also point out that the word warmth here in Pali, usma, so it does have the literal meaning of warmth or heat, but it also has the implied meaning, similarly to the previous one, of life force, of the basic vital energy that animates a body, that allows a body to operate and function. So there may be something lost in translation here, and that it's possible that these terms ayu and usma, so vitality and warmth, this may have related to metaphysical ideas of how bodies operated that were present in ancient India, but that would just be speculation because that's not carried down to us in any sutta. And this description of vitality and warmth and the relation between them, I can't actually think of any other sutta which goes into it. This might be the only place in the suttas that it comes up, though if anybody knows of another place where it comes up, please let me know. Yeah, so I find this a slightly puzzling statement. I'm not sure exactly what Sāriputta is trying to get at here. So then Sāriputta says, therefore, Venerable, I will make a simile. Some discerning people understand the meaning of a statement by means of a simile. Venerable, just as the radiance of a burning oil lamp is apparent because of the flame, and the flame is apparent because of the radiance. In the same way, Venerable, the existence of vitality depends on warmth, and the existence of warmth depends on vitality. And then Mahākoṭṭhita asks, Venerable, are vitality formations experienceable phenomena, or are vitality formations one thing and experienceable phenomena something else? So the question here, so vitality formations is ayu sankhara. So ayu means vitality or life, and sankhara is formations or conditional phenomena. So ayu sankhara, translated here as vitality formations, is a very literal statement. But he's asking, so the thing which we call vitality, is that something that can be directly experienced? can you directly experience vitality itself? This is what he's asking. Or is it not something which can be directly experienced? And Sāriputta answers, Venerable, vitality formations are not experienceable phenomena. In other words, you can't directly experience vitality itself. But you can see how vitality animates living beings. You can see how vitality is a necessary condition for living beings. He says, Venerable, if vitality formations were experienceable phenomena, then a monk who has attained the cessation of perception and feeling cannot be seen emerging from that attainment. In other words, he's saying if vitality was an ordinary sankhara that could be seen and felt like other sankharas, then when a monk entered the samadhi of no perception and no feeling, then they would instantly die. Because the vitality sankhara would come to an end, which means their body would die. Then he says, because vitality formations are one thing and experienceable phenomena are something else, then a monk who has attained the cessation of perception and feeling can be seen emerging from that attainment. In other words, the continuation of the vitality of the body is not dependent upon the current state of mind. So even when the mind enters into the complete cessation of perception and feeling, the body continues to live. So the vitality of the body doesn't stop. So then Mahākoṭṭhita asks, Venerable, how many phenomena has this body abandoned when it lies forsaken and discarded like an insentient log? In other words, when the body dies, what's been lost? And Sāriputta answers, Venerable, when this body has abandoned three phenomena, vitality, heat, and consciousness, then this body lies forsaken and discarded like an insentient log. And Mahākoṭṭhita asks, what is the difference between one who is dead and a monk who has attained the cessation of perception and feeling? This is an important distinction because there's one story, and I don't remember if this is in the suttas or in the commentaries, but there's one story of a monk who entered the cessation of perception and feeling. And then somebody came up and just saw this body just sitting there and thought like, oh, this monk is dead. They've clearly passed away. But then they realized that the body was still warm. And concluded that the monk was still alive. But from the outside, someone who's in the cessation of perception and feeling, they're completely unmoving, they're not breathing, and they don't react at all to anything in the outside world. So somebody who didn't know might think that the person had just passed away. So then Sāriputta answers, when one is dead, the physical formations have ceased and subsided, the verbal formations have ceased and subsided, and mental formations have ceased and subsided. So this is one place where sankhara could be translated as activities. One place where that translation would be quite appropriate. So all physical activity has stopped, all verbal activity has stopped, and all mental activity has stopped. So this is the case with someone who's dead. Vitality is completely eliminated, so the body is no longer alive. Warmth has faded, so the body is starting to cool off. And the faculties have dissipated. So there's no longer sight, smell, sound. There's no longer seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and feeling. Sāriputta says, when a monk has attained the cessation of perception and feeling, the physical formations have ceased and subsided, verbal formations have ceased and subsided, mental formations have ceased and subsided. In other words, the physical, mental, and verbal activities are all stopped. So there's no activity at all in the body, speech, or mind. But vitality is not completely eliminated. Warmth has not faded. In other words, the body is still alive. The autonomic nervous system is still operating. So the blood is still flowing, etc. and the body is still warm. And he says, and the faculties are very clear. Again, I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to here, because with the cessation of perception and feeling, there's also no sensory experience happening. So there's nothing to be aware of. So the faculties, the sense faculties are there, but they're not presently operating. So Sāriputta says, Venerable, this is the difference between one who is dead and a monk who has attained the cessation of perception and feeling. So then the next section that we get into, Mahākoṭṭhita asks, how many conditions are there for the attainment of the mental liberation that is neither painful nor pleasant? This doesn't seem to be referring to a state of jhana necessarily, as this is not a standard definition of any of the jhanas. But you'll notice that in the answer that Sāriputta gives, he actually directly refers to the fourth jhana. So at first it says, the mental liberation that is neither painful nor pleasant. So that just sounds like developing equanimity. So developing strong equanimity. But Sāriputta's answer, he says, there are 4 conditions for the attainment of the mental liberation that is neither painful nor pleasant. Here a monk has abandoned pleasure, has abandoned pain, and with the prior disappearance of elation and dejection, he attains and remains in the 4th jhana, which is neither painful nor pleasant and has purification due to equanimity and mindfulness. Venerable, these are the 4 conditions for the attainment of the mental liberation that is neither painful nor pleasant. So he clearly defines it in terms of the 4th jhana. So some people practice equanimity as a practice of its own, and it's possible to get into very peaceful states of mind just by focusing on equanimity. But complete, perfect equanimity is 4th jhana. It's developing this very strong stillness of mind through samadhi, in which the mind is completely unshakable. There's another form of mental liberation through equanimity, which is equanimity coming through insight. So through clearly seeing desire and aversion, clearly seeing the dukkha of desire and aversion, one can cease engaging in wanting and rejecting. One can drop desire and aversion. And then one will also experience perfect equanimity. But that's equanimity coming through wisdom rather than through samadhi. And that's not what Sāriputta mentions here. He doesn't talk about equanimity arising from wisdom. He just mentions equanimity from samadhi. Next, Mahākoṭṭhita asks, how many conditions are there for the attainment of the mental liberation that has no subject? So that is animitta ceto vimutti. So these days I usually translate animitta as objectless. So he's referring to samadhi with no object. So normally when we practice samadhi, we're focusing on an object. We're focusing on our body, or we're focusing on metta, or we're focusing on the Buddha, or we're focusing on some object. In animitta samadhi, there's no object. We don't allow the mind to fixate on any one thing. So Sāriputta answers, there are 2 conditions for attainment of the mental liberation that has no subject. Non-attention to any subject, and attention to the element of subjectlessness. Venerable, these are the 2 conditions for attainment of the mental liberation that has no subject. In other words, to attain objectless samadhi, don't pay attention to any object. Like, don't fixate or focus on any object. And direct your mind to objectlessness. So drop all forms, as they say in the Chan school. It's a very simple direction. Drop all forms. Don't focus on anything in particular. Drop all forms. Then Mahākoṭṭhita asks, how many conditions are there for the continuation of the mental liberation that has no subject? In other words, how do you keep going with animitta samadhi? And Sāriputta answers, there are 3 conditions for continuation of the mental liberation that has no subject: non-attention to any subject, attention to the element of subjectlessness, and prior preparation. In other words, it's dependent upon previously determining that you're not going to do anything else with the mind. Previously determining that you're going to stay focused on objectless samadhi. When you're actually fully in objectless samadhi, you're not actually doing anything. One is not engaging in any activity. So it's dependent upon previously directing your mind correctly that allows you to stay in objectless samadhi for long periods of time. Then Mahākoṭṭhita asks, how many conditions are there for emergence from the mental liberation that has no subject? In other words, how do you fall out of animitta samadhi? And Sāriputta answers, there are 2 conditions for emergence from the mental liberation that has no subject: attention to any subject, and non-attention to the element of subjectlessness. In other words, the moment you start directing your mind towards a particular object, then you will fall out of animitta samadhi. Then Mahākoṭṭhita asks, Venerable, regarding limitless mental liberation, that's appamana, ceto vimutti, nothingness mental liberation, akinchanya, ceto vimutti, emptiness mental liberation, sunyata, ceto vimutti. Again, some people say that sunyata is not mentioned in the Pali Canon. I don't know what they're talking about. It's mentioned in many places. This is one. So, emptiness mental liberation and subjectless mental liberation. Again, objectless mental liberation. Animitta samadhi. Animitta ceto vimutti. He asks, are these phenomena different in meaning and different in name, or are they one in meaning and different only in name? In other words, are these different things, or are they just different names for the same thing? And Sāriputta answers, Venerable, regarding limitless mental liberation, nothingness mental liberation, emptiness mental liberation, and subjectless mental liberation. Venerable, there is a description whereby these phenomena are different in meaning and different in name. And there is a description whereby these phenomena are one in meaning and different only in name. In other words, he says it depends on how you define these terms. There's a way of defining them in which they're different things, and a way of defining them in which it's just different names for the same thing. So Mahākoṭṭhita asks, what is the description whereby these phenomena are different in meaning and different in name? So here Venerable Sāriputta is going to describe each of these 4 in a way which makes them different. So a definition of these 4 which is different from each other. He says, here, Venerable, with a mind of loving friendliness, a monk pervades the first direction as well as the second, third, and fourth direction. So spreading metta, so radiating metta, loving friendliness, loving kindness. Thus, above, below, all around, impartially and all-encompassing, he pervades the entire world with a mind of loving friendliness that is abundant, vast, limitless, free of hostility, and free of enmity. So these are the basic qualities that we're looking for in our metta practice. We want our metta practice to be abundant, vast, limitless, free of hostility, and free of enmity. And it should be impartial and all-encompassing. So not may everyone except 45 be happy. That's not correct. That's not metta. It's may everyone be happy, no exceptions. So he says, Venerable. And then he says the same for compassion, empathic joy, and equanimity. So that's karuna, mudita, and upekkha. He says, Venerable, this is called limitless mental liberation. And what is nothingness mental liberation? Here a monk completely transcends the dimension of consciousness, and perceiving there is nothing. He attains and remains in the dimension of nothingness. Venerable, this is called nothingness mental liberation. So this is referring to one of the formless attainments, the incorporeal attainments, which are beyond jhana. So the perception of nothingness, in which one perceives absolutely nothing existing except for oneself. So there's still the experience of the subjective observer, which observes nothingness, but otherwise that's all there is. So this is a state of mind which can be achieved in deep samadhi, but it's just a form of samadhi. It's not an attainment of wisdom. Then what is emptiness mental liberation? And he answers, a monk who has gone to a forest, to the base of a tree, or to an empty house considers in this way. This is empty of a soul or of anything belonging to a soul. So the Pali word here, so atta is what's translated here as soul. So normally atta is translated as self. But it refers to that self-existent essence of a thing, which normally we refer to people, the self-existent essence of a person. But in Buddhist tradition, it's also sometimes used to refer to the self-existent essence of any object, which from a Buddhist standpoint, nothing has a self-existent essence. Things are only defined in terms of their relationship to other things. Sankharas can only be defined in terms of their relationship to other sankharas. So nothing exists of its own. It only exists as part of a whole, part of the whole mass of samsara. So here, though, it's interesting that Sāriputta is defining emptiness mental liberation, so sunyata, as practicing the perception of not self. Perceiving things as not having any self-existence, not any eternal, persistent essence or nature. Then, what is subjectless mental liberation? And he says, by not paying attention to any subject, a monk attains and remains in the subjectless mental liberation. A very simple definition. Don't focus on any object, and you'll enter objectless mental liberation. He says, this is the description whereby these phenomena are different in meaning and different in name. By the way, minor translation point, the questioning here, so what is emptiness, mental liberation, and so on. Here it's translated as though the questions are coming from Mahākoṭṭhita, but the Pali text is actually unclear whether those interjections are being made by Mahākoṭṭhita or whether they're said by Venerable Sāriputta. Doesn't affect the meaning of the text at all. It's just an interesting little aside. Then Mahākoṭṭhita asks, what is the description whereby these phenomena are one in meaning and different only in name? In other words, he's saying, how do you define these four kinds of mental liberation such that they all mean the same thing and there's just different terms to describe the same thing? So Sāriputta answers. He says, Venerable, lust is a limit maker. Hatred is a limit maker. Delusion is a limit maker. For a monk who has eliminated his defilements, they are abandoned, cut off at the root, made like a tree trunk, obliterated, incapable of arising in the future. Venerable, of all the limitless mental liberations, the unshakable mental liberation is considered the best. And the unshakable mental liberation is empty of lust, empty of hatred, empty of delusion. Venerable, lust is something, hatred is something, delusion is something. For a monk who has eliminated his defilements, these are abandoned, cut off at the root, made like a tree trunk, obliterated, incapable of arising in the future. Venerable, of all the nothingness mental liberations, the unshakable mental liberation is considered the best. And the unshakable mental liberation is empty of lust, empty of hatred, empty of delusion. Venerable, lust is a subject maker. Hatred is a subject maker. Delusion is a subject maker. For a monk who has eliminated his defilements, these are abandoned, cut off at the root, made like a tree trunk, obliterated, incapable of arising in the future. Venerable, of all the subjectless mental liberations, the unshakable mental liberation is considered the best, and the unshakable mental liberation is empty of lust, empty of hatred, empty of delusion. So here he's talking about somebody who has completely eliminated greed, hatred, and delusion. So he's talking about an enlightened being. So he's saying the mind of an enlightened being is free of the limits of greed, hatred, and delusion. Therefore, it is called the limitless mental liberation. It is free of the somethings of greed, hatred, and delusion. Therefore, it is the nothingness liberation, because there is nothing of greed, hatred, and delusion to be found there. And it is also objectless, because lust creates objects. It's an object maker. Because you have to want something. You have to have greed for an object. If there's no objects, there's no greed. If there's no greed, there's no objects. Hatred, you have to hate something. You have to hate an object. If there's no objects, there's no hatred. If there's no hatred, there's no objects. And you have to be deluded about an object. There has to be an object for you to be deluded about, something for you to be deluded about. So if there's no subject for delusion, then you can't define delusion. You can't point it out. You can't indicate delusion. And he says here that the unshakable mental liberation, which is the liberation of an enlightened being, is empty of lust, hatred, and delusion, which is why it's also then called the emptiness mental liberation. So this is a way in which we can say that all four of these terms are talking about the same thing. They're talking about the mind which is completely free of greed, hatred, and delusion. So he says, this is the description whereby these phenomena are one in meaning and different only in name. This is what Venerable Sāriputta said, satisfied Venerable Mahākoṭṭhita, delighted in Venerable Sāriputta's speech. That's the end of this sutta. So this sutta is a lovely hodgepodge of all kinds of random, mostly unrelated questions, which is part of what makes it fun. So I hope you've enjoyed this sutta. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and type them in and we'll discuss it a bit further.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So, okay, let me check. And hello to Jessica and CT from Australia, as well as Kevin and Galaxy. Good to see you, friends. And Ishan says, Dear Bhante, coming from a Hindu background, I always believed that the soul is responsible to keep one alive, and at death, the soul disappears. But I have not studied anywhere in the suttas about this phenomenon and never experienced my soul. It seems like just the wrong view that I held for a long time. Can just working of the 5 faculties considered as the vital force? What ruins these faculties? Can't thank you enough with gratitude.
Yeah, in Buddhism we have the teaching of anatta, so anatman, the idea that there is no soul, there is no persistent true essence for any being. So vitality, the life force of a body, is not arising from the soul because there isn't a soul. There isn't a soul from which it arises. Nonetheless, there needs to be mind present in a body for the body to be alive. There needs to be consciousness, with the one peculiar incident of the cessation of perception and feeling. So this particular state of samadhi in which the mind has basically stopped operating entirely. But it's still there, it's just dormant. So it's still, you might say that's what keeps the body alive. It's the presence of the mental aggregates, the mental components, the mind component of being. is what allows the body to be functional. But you can also say that things like plants are alive in a way, and yet they have no sentience, they have no consciousness, they have no mind, and yet they live in their own way. So vitality can also be seen as a mechanical function of physical components coming together in a particular way. To be honest, though, I don't think it's worth getting caught up in these points because it's kind of beside the point. We're not really interested in biology per se in Buddhist practice, and if you want to study biology, that's fine, I suppose. But we're not really interested in these things. Rather, we're really interested in understanding the mind and the functioning of the mind. And in particular, we're interested in understanding how we create our own suffering through misdirected mental activities. And we're interested in understanding how we can instead cultivate morality, samadhi, and wisdom. We're interested in how we can cultivate a direct, clear understanding of the nature of reality, a direct personal knowledge of the nature of reality. So I wouldn't get too caught up in speculating about what is it that makes the body alive, because ultimately we're only really interested in the body as being a reflection of our mental activities. We're only really interested in the body to the extent to which it gives us a mirror for looking at our own mind. It's the mind which is of prime importance. It's the mind which needs to be understood. It's the mind which needs to be trained. The body is only relevant to the extent to which it helps us to understand and train the mind. Okay?
Thank you, Bhante. Gita asks, Bhante, in these formlessness states, is there no human pulse to be detected? Ajahn Brahm once shared that a layperson he knew entered into one of these states in Australia and was taken to ER as his wife got worried. An Indian doctor on duty said he was in a state of meditation. The person came out of the meditation and was surprised to find himself in the hospital.
So I know that the breathing stops. As for whether the pulse stops, I actually don't know off the top of my head. So I've never entered the formless samadhis, the incorporeal samadhis. I've never entered those states. I'm not interested in those states, to be perfectly honest. So I'm trying to remember what I've heard other teachers talk about. And what I seem to recall is that the pulse slows down to the point where it becomes imperceptible, but that it's still there. Like the body is still functioning. It's just functioning on an extremely slow, very minimal level, like just barely enough to keep the body alive. Yeah, that means somebody's pulse might become imperceptible. The breathing becomes imperceptible or stops entirely. Yeah, and doctors who aren't familiar with meditation tend to be really freaked out by these things.
Okay. And Pawan is asking, when are the next Satipatthana Sutta parts coming? There's only part 1 on YouTube. That is weird. Actually, there should be all the parts because we did everything. So
yeah, we did a series. We did all 4 parts. It might be referring to the one class that we had done before the pandemic.
That's what I'm thinking about.
I actually think we should delete that one because we already have a series of 4.
But Pawan, if you send us an email at info@buddhistinsights.com, which is now on the live chat at this email here, we can send you the links for the Satipatthana Sutta. Okay, and Gabriela is asking, Bhante, you mentioned that some people do not think that emptiness meditation is found in the suttas. Why do you think they have this false impression?
I'm actually not exactly sure where this comes from. But yeah, I've encountered quite a number of Mahayana and Vajrayana practitioners who say this. But I don't know where they're getting it from, because if one reads the Pali Suttas, it becomes pretty clear that the Buddha spoke about emptiness on many occasions. So I think it's part of the general misunderstanding of Theravada, which tends to come from people who don't study Theravada, but who hear the usual stereotypes about Hinayana and then assume that those stereotypes apply to Theravada. I think that's where it comes from. So there's a number of stereotypes about Hinayana, and most of it doesn't apply to Theravada. And one of the stereotypes about Hinayana is that Hinayana teaches that objects are permanent and self-existing, and that Hinayana therefore does not teach about emptiness. But anybody who has even a general knowledge of the Theravada system and the Pali Suttas knows that this is not an accurate description of Theravada. So I think that's where it comes from. It comes from the misunderstanding, people thinking that Hinayana refers to Theravada when actually it doesn't. Hinayana refers to something else, a set of misunderstandings about Buddhism, which also most Theravadins would disagree with. Yeah, I think that's where it comes from.
Okay. And her other question is, when practicing the higher jhana, is there a health risk for someone who has asthma?
I don't think so. In fact, I would suspect it's quite the opposite. This is one of the really lovely things, actually, about the subtlety of breathing that comes in samadhi. If you have difficulty breathing on a day-to-day basis, then as your samadhi develops, your breath becomes very subtle, which means it's much easier to breathe. So I don't have asthma, but I do get seasonal allergies, and sometimes my seasonal allergies are quite intense. It can be difficult to breathe normally. But as my samadhi deepens and the breath becomes more subtle and refined, then it's easy to breathe. So your body is breathing very slowly and softly. The serenity of body and mind means that the body doesn't seem to need very much air. So it doesn't matter that my nose is so clogged I can only bring in a very thin stream of air. It doesn't matter because a thin stream of air is enough. So I would actually imagine it's the same for someone with asthma. In samadhi, so samadhi breathing, you're getting more than enough. Just a very thin stream of air is plenty.
Okay, and Mark is asking if anyone has access to the audiobook of Stillness Flowing, the biography of Ajahn Chah. Well, I think if you go on forestsangha.org, you should be able to find it there fully. Forestsangha.org is the website for everything Ajahn Chah lineage. And Michael is asking, I have also heard Theravada practitioners state that emptiness is not taught by the Buddha, perhaps in an attempt to separate Theravada from Mahayana, albeit false.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. So it does also, as you're pointing out, it does also come from the other direction. There are, in fact, a number of Theravada practitioners who desperately want to present Mahayana as being vile heresies invented by bored monks hundreds of years after the Buddha. And therefore, yeah, try to divorce Theravada entirely from Mahayana teachings. But it's really a stretch to start cutting things out of the Pali Suttas just because they sound Mahayana. That's going way too far. And so often I think it's actually coming from just a lack of understanding of the Pali Suttas in many cases. But sometimes it comes down to people redefining things in the Pali Suttas to fit their pre-existing ideas. So I've also encountered some people who, they actually admit that the Buddha mentions Samyutta in the Pali Canon, but then they try to redefine the word sunyata to mean something other than what it says. They try to redefine the word sunyata to become meaningless. And that also, I think, is quite harmful, to be honest, but also counterproductive. Yeah, I don't really see any point in like trying to forcibly separate Theravada and Mahayana. They blur together, and that's fine. There's no big deal.
Aw, and Michael says, and that is one of the, well, there's, I think, typo, but it's kind of funny because it says it. That is one of the 5 parentheses 3 reasons I deeply appreciate your teaching. So it's either 5 or 3 reasons or 53, or maybe that.
Either way, however many, that's fine.
All right, and I think that's all for this morning. Thank you, friends, for, he says numbers are typos. In general. Like I would say numbers are typos in general. All right, well, thank you again, Bhante, for teaching us. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And thank you, friends, for diligently tuning in and studying the suttas together. This evening, we will be meeting again to discuss emotions in Buddhism, with featuring a mystery monk that you will only find out at 7:30 p.m. Who will it be? Bhante Suddhaso, Bhante Jayasara, or Ayasoma?
So here's a hint. The mystery monk's name is Ayasoma.
Maybe not. We'll see.
The mystery monk's name starts with I and ends with Yasoma. There's your hint.
Okay, and then tomorrow morning we will be meeting again for sutta study with
a mystery monk. Who knows?
And in the evening there will be monk chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to bring any questions you have, and the monastics will answer them at that time. So once again, reminder, from now onwards, we're only meeting on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, both morning and evening. Although this Saturday, there will be a short workshop, having tea with Mara, it's called, in the afternoon. I think it's 3 p.m., from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., something like that. So there will be, it will be soon posted. All right. Well, have a great rest of the day and have a great in general.